992 years before Christ, David, the son of Jesse, and the great-grandson of Ruth and Boaz, was the youngest of the 8 sons, a little boy shepherd,
and was chosen by God to be anointed by the prophet Samuel as the second king of Israel.
He was to replace King Saul because Saul stopped listening to God's voice. King Saul hires young David to play songs for him to comfort his troubling spirit. During the war against the Philistines, David steps forward to take on Goliath, the giant of the Philistines, and defeats him with one blow from his sling. King Saul takes him in, and David becomes best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. King Saul grows jealous of David and continuously puts him in the forefront of every battle with the hopes that he may capture death. But the Lord is with David and gives him protection and triumph. David becomes the primary target of King Saul for assassination because the people of Israel like David more than him. David flees to the mountains in the wilderness of Ziph, and King Saul pursues him. Saul's garment is cut off by David when he goes to relieve himself in the cave that David was hiding in. David shows that he could have killed him, but wants peace between them. King Saul realizes that David is surely God's chosen because of his goodness. King Saul is overtaken by the Philistines and falls on his own sword to his death. Now, King Saul and all of his sons are dead. Abner, the heir of Saul, is assassinated due to a civil war conflict in Israel and solidifies David's new role as king of Israel. One of David's first actions as king was to kill those who assassinated Abner, the heir of Saul. David takes over Jerusalem and moves the Ark of the Covenant there and plans to build a temple for God. The prophet Nathan says that he will not do this, but his son will be the one to build the temple, and that God says, "And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever." Years later, during Israel's battle with Ammon and Rabbah, King David stays in Jerusalem and was walking about on the king's rooftop one evening when he saw a woman bathing herself. Her name was Bathsheba. He called for her and laid with her that evening, and she conceived. King David then called to have Uriah, her husband, put in the heaviest part of the battle so that he may die. And Uriah was killed by the Ammonites. Bathsheba gave birth to David's son, and David was confronted by the prophet Nathan and said that God was displeased with David and will take his child from him, but spare David's life. David comforted Bathsheba, and she was conceived with another son who was to be called Solomon, who was chosen to build God's temple. King David's seed continues the lineage of Jesus Christ through his son Solomon, through whom Joseph is descended. David faced 3 major giants in his life that led to different outcomes. Goliath, which brought on jealousy against him. The threat of King Saul, which led to blessings of a kingdom to David. The third giant that King David had to face was himself. When we try to rely more on ourselves and become proud and arrogant, thinking that we can get things done without God, we will receive correction from God that will humble us into repentance. This can lead to not only hurting ourselves, but hurting those around us, just as David caused to his people when he took a census, and his people were punished for it. No matter what giants we face in our lives, we cannot rely on looking upon our own strength. Rather, we need to look towards God and his promise to us
trust Him to be our strength.